There's a difference between being the best and being the most liked. Shawn Michaels never worried about the latter. He was too busy stealing shows, breaking hearts, and drop-kicking civility straight into the front row. In the world of pro wrestling, the Heartbreak Kid was equal parts ballet dancer and backstabber. A man with footwork so pretty it made grown men cry and politics so vicious, he made Machiavelli look like a guidance counselor. Behind the curtain, Shawn wasn't just controversial, he was a walking HR violation in sequins. And when it came to making enemies? Oh, Shawn didn't make enemies. He curated them. These weren't fleeting beefs over bad finishes or missed cues. No, these were long-burning rivalries born from ego, sabotage, and the kind of bitterness that gets passed down through generations like a cursed urn. Some of these men crossed the wrong clique member. Others simply had the misfortune of existing within a 10-foot radius of Michaels, while he was coming down from a 12-pack of emotional instability and backstage power tripping. So lace up your boots, throw on some chaps you have no business wearing, and let's moonwalk through HBK's personal rogues gallery. The 5 men who made him want to tune up the band and kick someone's teeth down their throat for real. If wrestling was a university, Shane Douglas styled himself as the tenured professor teaching a class nobody wanted to take. Slapping on a robe and an attitude, he rebranded himself in WWF as Dean Douglas, a smug, clipboard-wielding academic who lectured the crowd like they owed him student loan payments. But he made one fatal miscalculation. He brought a thesaurus to a gunfight with Shawn Michaels. Shawn never respected Douglas. Not as a performer, not as a personality, and certainly not as a threat. While Shane prided himself on being a student of the game, Michaels saw him as a substitute teacher trying to take tenure in a locker room full of sharks. Worse yet, Douglas was too vocal. He wasn't afraid to call out the clique's stranglehold on WWF politics, and nothing made Shawn's eye twitch like a mid-carder getting mouthy. The real heat erupted in 1995 when Shawn forfeited the Intercontinental Championship. Due to a concussion, Douglas snatched the belt off Shawn and was the IC champion, and then lose it minutes later to Razor in the same show. Welcome to WWF, where the only thing more painful than the bumps is your reputation dying in real time. The clique didn't just bury Douglas, they embalmed him and planted him under the foundation. Behind the scenes, Douglas was vocal about the clique's manipulations, but Michaels wasn't about to lose sleep over a guy cutting promos like he was trying to sell you a timeshare in purgatory. HBK mocked Douglas both in private and public, calling him boring, phony, and deluded. It didn't help that Douglas had a chip on his shoulder the size of Pittsburgh and the charisma of a chalkboard lecture. In ECW, Douglas was a legend. In WWF, he was just a speed bump on Shawn's road to dominance. And once the clique decided you weren't welcome, you weren't just leaving the party. You were being kicked down the stairs. Douglas learned that the hard way. Shawn didn't just dislike him, he actively lobbied for his irrelevance. Consider it an F on the only report card that mattered. Ah, Marty Janetti. The name alone conjures the image of Shawn Michaels' former tag team partner who, despite a promising career, was doomed to live in the perpetually dimming light of his partner's star. In wrestling, there's always that one guy who seems to have the world at his feet only to have it slip away because of his own actions. Marty Janetti was that guy, except he didn't just lose the world, he lost his spot in the tag team picture so violently it's still shaking in the archives. Marty and Shawn formed the Rockers, a dynamic tag team in the late 1980s that looked like it had the potential to be legendary. But, as with most great tag teams, there was a ticking time bomb. Janetti was always the one who couldn't quite keep up with Michaels' growth. While Shawn's in-ring abilities evolved, his charisma skyrocketed, and he eventually blossomed into the Heartbreak Kid. Marty seemed to be stuck in a cycle of bad decisions and questionable bookings. That's the sad truth that Shawn couldn't help but notice. His partner was sabotaging himself, both inside and outside the ring. Their eventual breakup came in 1992, when Michaels threw Janetti through the barbershop window in one of the most memorable moments in wrestling history. Shawn's career trajectory went stratospheric, while Marty's career plummeted faster than the stock market during a recession. But here's the kicker. Shawn didn't just leave Janetti behind, he did it with style. By turning on Marty in front of an audience, he wasn't just breaking up a team, he was making sure the whole world knew he was the superior talent. And let's be honest, he was. Despite Marty's occasional returns to WWE and sporadic runs in different promotions, the bitterness never really subsided. From Marty's accusations of Shawn being a glorified prima donna, to Shawn claiming he couldn't carry Janetti through a match without worrying about Marty turning into a backstage distraction, their relationship soured with every passing year. While Janetti was content to drift between the indies, Shawn ascended to the top of the mountain, wearing a championship belt on his shoulder and a grin on his face, knowing that not only was he the best, but he was the one who had to carry Marty's dead weight to get there. Oh, brother, if there's anyone who made Shawn Michaels roll his eyes so hard they almost got stuck in the back of his head, it was Hulk Hogan. The man who defined the 80s and 90s with his larger-than-life persona was also a man whose backstage politics and ego often ran wild, much like his famous catchphrase. While Hogan was busy securing his place as wrestling royalty, Michaels was climbing the ladder with his own unique flair, making the kind of waves that can only come from someone who legitimately believed he was the best in the world. And when it came to the two of them, let's just say things were never smooth sailing. The most infamous chapter in their saga happened at SummerSlam 2005, when they squared off in a highly anticipated match. Hogan, the veteran, came in with a sense of entitlement that was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, had no interest in letting Hogan dictate the pace of the match. He was a perfectionist and believed in giving the fans a spectacle that would have them talking for years to come. And, well, let's just say Hogan wasn't exactly a fan of Michaels' style. While Michaels was more than willing to put Hogan over, he quickly realized that Hogan wanted more than just a win. He wanted to control the entire match, telling Shawn what to do and when to do it, as if they were in a Hogan movie, and Shawn was merely a supporting character. Michaels, not one to play the second fiddle, started to push back, not outwardly at first, but in the ring, where he knew Hogan's slow, methodical style wasn't exactly going to work with his own high-energy, fast-paced movements. After that match, Shawn and Hogan didn't exactly become best friends. There were still shots taken, passive-aggressive moments, and stories shared among the locker room of their backstage disputes. But Hogan, being Hogan, always seemed to feel entitled to the spotlight, even when it meant stepping on other people's toes. For Shawn Michaels, that was a bridge too far. In the end, the two men would never be able to fully reconcile their differences. They were simply two different animals in the wrestling zoo. One was the living legend who could do no wrong, and the other was a generational talent who wasn't about to take a back seat for anyone, even if that anyone was a Hall of Famer. Big Van Vader was a beast in the ring, a terror who could crush men like cans underfoot. But to Shawn Michaels, he was more like a malfunctioning wrecking ball with a bad attitude and even worse footwork. And while Vader might have been one of the most fearsome men on the planet, Shawn was way too busy being an art form to care about working with someone who looked like he was auditioning for a role as the human wreckage in a demolition derby. Their SummerSlam 96 match should have been a headliner for the ages. Vader, the terrifyingly powerful monster, against Michaels, the show-stealing, high-flying icon. But what it turned into was an embarrassing display of Vader's inability to follow a script. The only thing Vader knew how to hit was Shawn's head, and not in the perfectly timed spot way. No, Vader was the kind of guy who'd hit you with a clothesline so stiff, you'd need a chiropractor and a priest to work on your soul afterward. At one point, Vader missed a cue so badly that Michaels had to yell, "Move!" mid-match. This wasn't the kind of call-it-in-the-ring moment you're used to. This was Shawn telling the audience, "Hey, I'm dealing with a guy who just turned my face into a pancake. Watch this." Vader was so clumsy that Shawn might as well have been trying to choreograph a ballet with a toddler who had 2 left feet and an ego the size of a planet. Vader's backstage behavior didn't help matters either. He would have probably wrestled a mattress if it was more cooperative, and Shawn couldn't stand him. In fact, he went straight to Vince McMahon and told him point blank, "It's me or the steamroller." Vince made his choice, and Vader found himself banished to the wrestling equivalent of Siberia, while Shawn continued to prance around the ring like a ballerina who just realized he was better than you and everyone in your family. The moral of the story? Don't mess with the guy who dances. You might just get flattened by a stiff breeze and a non-existent sense of timing. You knew this one was coming. Bret the Hitman Hart, the man who made wrestling as dull as a high school history class, always seemed like he was perpetually chewing on a sour lemon. While some wrestlers were busy partying, cracking jokes, and creating legends, Bret was locked in a passionate, lifelong debate with his own reflection, trying to convince it that he was the best there ever was, the best there is, and the best there ever will be. Spoiler, he wasn't. Bret had this unbelievable arrogance about him, as if his painfully stiff, technical style of wrestling was a direct contribution to world peace. Meanwhile, Shawn Michaels was busy elevating the business, flipping, soaring, and generally being the hottest thing since molten lava. But Bret? Nah, he was just out there in his leather jacket, looking like the human embodiment of a cold, unseasoned potato. No spice, just a stiff, bland lump of wrestling excellence that no one cared about outside of Canada. Their feud, however, wasn't just about wrestling. Oh no, it was personal, philosophical, and about as volatile as putting a gallon of gasoline next to a matchstick. Bret, the self-proclaimed purist of the sport, had no time for Shawn's acrobatics, flash, and showmanship. Shawn, on the other hand, had zero interest in being part of Bret's "I'm Canadian and I wear sunglasses indoors" club. They hated each other the way cats hate water. It was mutual, it was inevitable, and it was the source of many backstage tantrums. But then came Montreal, 1997, the day Shawn Michaels became the most hated man in wrestling. It was like a pro wrestling "Who Shot JFK" moment. Bret Hart, all hot and bothered, refused to drop the title to Shawn in Canada. And Vince, being Vince, orchestrated the most chaotic conspiracy since The X-Files. As the bell rang during that infamous screwjob, Shawn looked around like he just realized he had won a battle, but at what cost? The crowd erupted in fury, and Bret Hart's face contorted like he had just bitten into a rotten apple. The aftermath? A decade of Cold War. Bret disappeared to WCW, and Shawn strutted around like he just defeated the world's most boring foe. Even when they eventually made up, like some kind of awkward forced reconciliation, you could practically hear the polite clapping in the background. Yeah, they shook hands, but it was more awkward than that time your mom made you hug your cousin at a family reunion because it's nice to be kind. In the end, Shawn got the redemption arc, and Bret got to sit in his leather jacket, sulking about how everyone else ruined his career. Shawn? He went on to make even more money, get even more title reigns, and somehow convince everyone that, despite all the backstage drama, he was still the best. And Bret? Well, he's still bitter and pretending his legacies are pure while quietly trying to pretend he isn't the most overrated technical wrestler in history. So, there you have it. Shawn Michaels' personal hall of shame, a collection of wrestlers who found themselves caught in the crossfire of Shawn's ambitions, egos, and extremely selective friendships. The drama, the feuds, and the countless locker room scuffles may have faded from the spotlight, but one thing remains. Shawn Michaels was, and still is, the best in the business. And the best part? While the other guys were busy playing politics, clashing egos, and pretending to be in control, Shawn Michaels just kept on stealing the show. Sure, he might have stepped on a few heads, or egos, or careers along the way, but let's be honest, no one remembers the guys who played nice. They only remember the ones who burned the place down while making sure they looked damn good doing it. So, the next time someone mentions a wrestler who could have been in Shawn's top 5 hated list, just remember one thing. Michaels didn't just hate these guys because they were obstacles in his way. He hated them because they were simply too damn boring, stiff, or politically obsessed to keep up with the Heartbreak Kid's revolution. And in the world of wrestling, there's no greater sin than being a drag on the show. The Heartbreak Kid. Too talented, too controversial, and way too good to ever let the backstage drama get in the way of his greatness. And as for those 5, well, they can still stay mad because Shawn's still here, still shining, and still the greatest to ever lace up a pair of boots. If you liked that, don't forget to subscribe and like for more of Shawn Michaels' backstage drama, ruthless wrestling commentary, and general chaos. Hit that bell so you never miss another episode of me making fun of wrestlers who were either too stiff or too full of themselves to keep up with HBK's revolution. Thanks for watching.